Okay, let's start today's reading. It's really stop. I think just stop for a while. It will ring again. Um, and today I will take my another dog, Shari, go to the white to have her desexed. Then my two dogs, my two girls, will wear the big collar. Is it called collar? What? Big collar. Then they will, yeah, they will suffer together. Then this is my idea. So this is good for them, and then they won't bother each other. They all wear that thing. And yesterday, I didn't do the stream because the girl, my Bessie, she's not comfortable about because after the surgery, then she cried a lot. Then I comfort her. Then I uploaded the uploaded the Chinese reading. Then I think, okay, just we skip one day. Not good. I know, not good. I should date it and skip reading, English reading, and skip my exercise. Today I woke up around 5 and she didn't want me to get up, so I accompanied her on bed. Then I got up around 6. Then I did exercise, ballet workout. Today I go through the whole exercise. Before today, yesterday or before yesterday, I I separate the whole the whole a little bit to do others because it's too hard for me to remember all those movements. Those movements for me is I can't do it. But today I follow the whole movement. But of course I know my movement is so ugly. But anyway, I can follow all of this down. It's good. Then I think that's all for to record the things. Then that's reading. Great. I really like reading this. It was the open sea, with tremendous violence. It was the ocean without any visible limits, even for those whose gaze from radius extended over a radius of 40 miles. The vast liquid plain lashed without mercy. The vast liquid plain lashed without mercy appeared as if covered with herd of various charges. Appeared appeared as if covered with herd of various charges, whose white and disheveled crests were streaming in the wind. No land was in not a solitary ship could be seen. It was necessary at any cost to arrest their downward course. From being engulfed to more. Being engulfed in the wave, uh, the voyagers all their energies. The voyagers directed all their energies to this urgent work, but notwithstanding their effort, the balloon still fell. and at the same time shifted with the greatest rapidity, following the direction of the wind. It is, that is to say, from the northeast to the southwest. Frightful indeed was the situation of these unfortunate men. They were evidently no longer master of the attempts were useless. The case of the balloon collapsed more and more. The case of the balloon collapsed more and more. The gas escaped without any possibility of retaining it. Their descent was visible, accelerated, and soon after midday, the car hung within 5 feet of the ocean. It was impossible to prevent the escape of gas, which rushed through a large rent in the silk. By lightening the car of all which is contained, the passengers had been able to prolong their suspension. It was impossible to prevent the escape of gas, which rushed through a large rent in the silk. By lightening the car of all the articles contained, the passengers had been able to prolong their suspension in the air for a few hours, but the inevitable catastrophe could only be retarded. Inevitable catastrophe could only be retarded. If land didn't appear before night, voyagers' car and balloon must to a certain vanish beneath the waves. They now resorted to the only remaining expedient. They now resorted to the only remaining expedient. 是那个压箱物吗？ expedient 应急办法。They now only remaining expanded. 应急措施。求助于诉诸于某物。应急的对策。Resort the only remaining expedient. 应急措施。Resorted to the采取手段应急。Now they restored to the only remaining expedient. They were truly dauntless men. They knew how to look death in the face. They knew how to look death in the face. Dauntless men. Not a single murmur escaped from their lip. They were determined to struggle to the last minute to do anything to restart their fall. To retard their fall, a sort of willow basket. The car was only a sort of willow basket, unable to flow, and there was not the slightest possibility of maintaining it on the surface of the sea. 2 more hours passed and the balloon was scarcely 400 feet above the water. At that moment, a loud voice, a voice of a man whose heart was inaccessible to fear, was heard. To this voice responded others, not less determined. Is everything thrown out? No, here are still $2,000 in gold. A heavy bag immediately plunged into the sea. Does the balloon rise? A little, but it will not be long before it falls again. A little, but it won't be long. A little, but it won't be long before it falls again. What still remains to be thrown? What still remains to be thrown out? What still remains to be thrown out? Nothing. Yes, the car. Let's catch hold of the net and into the sea with the car. Let's catch hold of the net and into the sea with the car. This was in fact the last and only mode of lightening the balloon. Only mode. This is in fact the last and only mode of lightening the balloon. The rope which held the car was cut, and the balloon, after its fallen, mounted 200. After its fall, mounted. The 5 voyagers had hosted themselves into the night, and clung to the meshes, gazing at the abyss. The delicate sensibility of balloon is well known. It's sufficient to throw out the lightest article to produce a difference in its vertical position. The apparatus in the air is like a balance of mathematics precision. It can be thus easily understood that when it is lightened of any considerable weight, its movement will be impetuous and sudden. So it happened on the occasion. Its movement will be impetuous and sudden. So it happened on this occasion. But after being suspended for an instant afloat, the balloon began to redescend. The gas escaping by the rent, which it was impossible to repair. The man had done all that man could do. No human efforts could save them now. They must trust to the mercy of Him who ruled the elements. At 4 o'clock, the balloon was only 5 feet above the surface of the water. A loud barking was heard. Voyagers was held pressed close to his master in the meshes of the net. Top had seen something, cried one of the men. Then immediately a loud voice shouted, "Land! Land!" The wind still drove towards the southeast had since daybreak gone a considerable distance, which might be reckoned by hundreds of miles, and a tolerably high land, and in fact appeared in that direction. But this land was still 30 miles off. It would not take less than an hour to get to it, and then there was the chance of falling to leeward. Leeward 下风背风 oh yes. An hour might not the balloon before that be emptied of all fluid in it yet retained. An hour might not the balloon before that the emptied of all the fluid it yet retained. Such was the terrible question. The voyagers could distinctly see that solid spot which they must reach at any cost. They were ignorant whether an island. They were ignorant of what it was, whether an island or a continent. For they didn't know to what part of the world the hurricane had driven them. But they must reach this land, whether inhabited or whether hospitable or not, hospitable or not. It was evident that the balloon could no longer support itself. It was evident that the balloon could no longer support itself. Several times already had the crests of the enormous billows lick the bottom of the net. Several times already had the crest of the enormous billow lick the bottom of the net, making it still heavier, and the balloon only half rose, like a bird with a wooden wing. Half an hour later, the land was not more than a mile off. Half an hour later, the land was not more than a mile off, but the balloon, exhausted, flabby, hanging in great folds, had gas in its upper part alone. The voyagers clinging to the night was still too heavy for it. And soon, half plunged into the sea, they were half plunged into the sea. They were beaten by a furious wave. The balloon case bulged out again. And the wind ticket drove it along like a vessel. Balloon case bulge 膨胀暴涨突增 bulge out again, and the wind take it, drove it along like a vessel. Might it not possible thus reach the land? Might it not possible thus reach the land? But when only 2 fathoms of terrible cry resounded from 4 pairs of lungs at once. 2 fathoms of. But when only 2 fathoms of terrible cries resounded from 4 pairs of lungs, 4 pairs of at once, the balloon, which had appeared as if it would never again rise, suddenly made an unexpected bound, after having been struck by a tremendous sea. The balloon, which had appeared as if it would never again rise, suddenly made an unexpected bound, after having been struck by a tremendous sea, as if it had been at that instant relieved of a new part of its weight. It mounted to a height of 15,000 feet, or 1,500 feet, and here it met a current of wind, which, instead of taking it directly to the coast, carried it in a nearly parallel direction. At last, 2 minutes later, it approached obliquely. It approached obliquely and finally fell on a sandy beach, out of the reach of the wave. Reproach. Reproach 责备 It reproached oblique 斜的 oblique. Oh yeah, we already oblique. Obliquely, and finally fell on a sandy beach, out of the reach of the waves. The voyagers, aiding each other, managed to disengage themselves from the meshes of the net. The balloon, relieved of their weight, was taken by the wind, and like a wounded bird which revives from an instant, disappeared into space. But the car had contained 5 passengers with a dog, and the balloon only left 4 on the shore. But the car had contained 5 passengers with a dog, and the balloon only left 4 on the shore. The missing person had evidently been swept off by the sea, which had just struck the night. and it was owing to this circumstance that the lightened balloon raised the last time, and it was owing to the on. Let's see how to read it. Owing. And it was owing to
owing
it was owing 把它写下来吧
owing
and it was owing to this circumstance that the lightened balloon rose the last time, and then soon after scarcely had the four castaways set foot on the firms than they all think of the absent one. Scarcely had the four castaways set foot. 受难者、遇难者 ，I think，坐船遇难者 ，castaway。遇难者 The four castaways set foot on firm ground. Then they all think of the simultaneously exclaimed. Simultaneously.
simultaneous
simultaneously exclaimed. Perhaps he will try to swim to land. Let's save him. Chapter 2. Those whom the hurricane had just thrown on the coast. Those whom the hurricane had just thrown on this coast were neither aeronauts by profession nor amateurs. Aeronauts 宇航员那个时候哪有气球驾驶员 Aeronauts Aeronaut 气球驾驶员 Aeronaut by profession or amateurs 业余爱好者 amateurs
amateur
业余爱好者 amateur They were prisoners of war whose boldness had induced them to escape in this. They were prisoners of war whose boldness had induced them to escape, whose boldness induced them in this extraordinary manner, whose boldness had induced them to escape in this extraordinary manner. 100 times they had almost 100 times 100 times they had almost perished. 100 times had they almost fallen from the tall balloon into the depths of the ocean. But heaven had reserved them for a strange destiny. And after having on the 20th of March, and after having on the 20th of March escaped from Richmond, besieged by the troops of General Ulysses Grant, they found themselves 7,000 miles from the capital of Virginia, which was the principal stronghold of the South during the terrible of secession. The aerial voyage had lasted 5 days. War of Secession. 分离战争、脱离战争。Which year? Okay. The curious circumstances which lead to the escape of prisoners were as follows. In the month of February, in that same year, in the month of February 1865, in one of the coups, the mean by which General Grant attempted, though in vain, to possess himself of Richmond, several of its officers fell into the power of the enemy and were detained in the town. One of the most distinguished was Captain Harding. Captain Carlos Harding. He was a native of Massachusetts, a first-class engineer to whom the government had confided. During the war, the direction of the railway, which were so important at the time. A true northerner, thin, bony, lean, about 55 years of age. His close-cut hair and his beard, of which he only kept a thick mustache, were always getting gray. He had one of those finely developed heads which appeared made to be struck on a metal, piercing eyes. Made to be struck on a metal, What? Metal. 金属。奖章。
Medal.
Piercing eyes, a serious mouth. The physiognomy. A physiognomy. A physiognomy. Let's see. A physiognomy of a clever man of the military school. Really?
Physiognomy.
Physiognomy. 我们学过这个。Physiognomy. 人相学。The physiognomy of a clever man of the military school. He was one of those engineers who began by handling the hammer and the pickaxe, like generals who first act as common soldiers. Besides mental power, he also possessed great manual dexterity. 手工的 dexterity 灵巧dexterity
Dexterity.
灵巧灵活 His muscles exhibited remarkable proof of tenacity. Remarkable proof of tenacity. 韧性 Her muscles exhibited remarkable proof of tenacity. Tenacity.
Tenacity.
Tenacity. 韧性 A man of action as well as a man of action as well as a man of thought. I think I just a woman of thought, but I will be a woman of action because you only have thought mean nothing. Not mean nothing, but lies mean lies. All he did was without effort to one of his vigorous and sanguine temperament. Vigorous vigorous, vigorous,
vigorous,
vigorous。那个 Cyrus 爸爸也是 vigorous 吧，精力充沛的。充满活力的，朝气蓬勃的。充满活力的，朝气蓬勃的。And vigorous and sanguine 乐观的 and sanguine sanguine
sanguine,
sanguine
sanguine, sanguine,
乐观的。He did without efforts to one of his vigorous and sanguine temperament, learned clear-headed and practical. He fulfilled in all emergency those three conditions which united ought to ensure human success. Activity of mind and body, impetuous wishes, and powerful will. Activity of mind and body, impetuous wishes, and powerful will. He might have taken for his mentor that of William of Orange in the 17th century. I can undertake and persevere. Persevere even without hope of success. I can undertake and persevere even without the hope of success. Cruise, Harding. Cruz Harding was courage personified. Was courage personified. He had been in all the battle of that war. After having began as a volunteer at Illinois, and Ulysses Grant, he fought at Paddock, at the siege of Corinth River. Everywhere and valiantly. A soldier worth of the general who says, I never count my dead. And valiantly. everywhere and violently, a soldier worthy of the general who said, "I never count my dead." And hundreds of times Captain Harding had almost been among those who were not counted by the terrible Grant. But in these combats, but in these combats, where he never, spared himself, fortune favored him. Fortune favored him till the moment when he was wounded and taken prisoner on the field of the battle near Richmond. At the same time, and on the same day, another important personage fell into the hand of the Southerners. This was no other than General Spilett, a reporter for the New York Herald, ordered to follow the changes of the war in the midst of the Northern Army. Oh, I feel sleepy again because I woke up too early this morning. But let's keep reading. This was no other than Gideon Spilett, who had been ordered to follow the changes of the war in the midst of the Southern armies. Gideon Spilett was one of the race of indomitable English or American was one of that race of indomitable England or American chronicler like Stanley and others who stop at nothing to obtain exact information and transmit it to the journal in the shortest possible time. The newspapers of the Union, such as the New York Herald, are genius power, and their reporters are meant to be Gideon Spilett ranked among the first of those reporters, a man of great merit, energetic, prompt, and ready for anything, full of ideas, having traveled over the whole world, soldiers and artists, enthusiastic in council, resolute in action, acting neither for trouble, fatigue, nor danger when in pursuit of information, for himself first, and then for his journal, a perfect treasury of knowledge on all sorts of curious subjects of the unpublished, of the unknown, and of the impossible. Let's stop here. A little bit tired. And we'll reread this part tomorrow.